Hey, we're back for 100 D&B Bangers from Scratch, episode 3. So this one is called Let You Go. It's going to be coming out a little bit later this year, as per usual. And this one has sort of like a very melodic intro, but for the drop, I tried some really experimental, more trap style stuff, which is something I've done a little bit before. But I really made heavy use of 808s and like LFO leads and stuff. So we'll dive into that. I'll do a listen through first, and then we'll break down the track. Let's go. Awesome. So you can see we're hitting pretty loud there, same as usual, about -3 to -4 LUFS. Um, Definitely in this one, something I did that I don't often do is that I took out a lot of the sub bass in the non-drop sections. Um, I've seen like a lot of the pro guys like K9 and stuff often do this, and it's a little bit harder to work around because you still want that feeling you get from the bass that the notes play off it, but you're not having nearly as much sub presence there, and it sort of makes the drop hit a lot harder, and I think it makes it easier to mix in as well. Because ultimately, like, when you mix in the track, you're taking out the bass usually anyway. So, you know, it sort of makes you not rely on that to drive the track along. So that was just something interesting I tried for this one. So if we hop into it, so I've got break atmospheres and basses and effects, and then fills. And then I've got the vocals, and then I've got the break drums, and then I have the build drums, the drop basses, drop fills, drop leads, drop effects, and then the sidechain bus, obviously, with my shaper box and a Pro Q on here, which is essentially hard cutting anything below 20 hertz and above about 17,000 hertz. This is just on the non-drums and vocals, so leads and basses and synths and effects and stuff. And then we're doing like a pretty steep cutoff at around 130 hertz on just the sides, so that the sub is completely mono. And then I've done a bit of like a -1 dB dip on the sides, just overall, to basically, you know, like make that a bit more mono-compatible, like the whole song essentially, make it a bit more mono-compatible and cohesive. And then a small dip at 3.4k hertz, about -1 dB over the whole stereo field, just because that's a bit of a harsh frequency range there. So let's dive into it. So we'll start with the break atmosphere. So I'll solo that. So for this one, we've got a ARP that I just got off a Splice pack. We've got sort of like a D sharp note that's being held. It's just an atmosphere, or sort of like an ethereal drone sort of tension effect there. We've got a crowd roar. This one's like pushed pretty far back in the mix. And then we've got a vocal sort of atmosphere, which is basically I'm just filtering that down and giving it a bit more reverb and cutting some of the sides with my cube rack here. But I'm panning that one pretty left and the other atmosphere right. So you get that. Add the crowd roar in. Add the ARP. So once you add those all together, it really makes like a nice soundscape that you can listen to. So that's mainly it for your break atmospheres, and that's sort of how you like start the track. And then I've got the break bass, which is essentially just a resample that I kept pitching. This is +5, -4, etc., just to make a melody out of. So you can see it's got a lot of sub presence. So what I'm doing is I've high passed the bass here with my cube rack again. That's just a auto filter high pass, and I've done a low pass as well. So both of those sort of filter, mainly the low pass filters up, and then it also washes up towards the end of the build, but I won't get to that just yet. And then I've got a Pro Q3 on here, which is just cutting everything below 100 hertz. So this actually has no sub left once I've done that. Now, usually I would have left the sub in there, but for this one, I decided not to, like I was saying at the start. That's pretty much it for the intro bass. It just like follows that same 4-note pattern. Pauses for a bit when I have this fill here, goes into the build, and then gets washed out towards the end of the build to the point where it's completely muted at the... let me have a look. Yeah, it's like completely high passed once I get to the pre-drop, so there's essentially no information coming through there. That's it for break basses. Now for break effects, pretty much just got a lot of risers and fallers, so... You got your classic sort of saw wave riser. I've got a tonal riser. So this is like more reverbed and filtered back down. You know, a lot less high information, but together, you know, it really has that tone to it. You know, that's why it's called a tonal riser. And as we go further through, towards the end, when I do the second build, I actually swap the riser for a tension riser over here. perk loop. It just gets faster and faster, essentially. I've just used the divide one here to basically just double the speed of the BPM of the sample. So I've got other little risers in here. Like tonal hits and stuff. There's like a more high-pitched tonal riser that comes in halfway through the build. That's a downer. Other little ones. Got like exhausts there, reverse exhausts. And then later on, I actually... Basically, this is the vocal, and I just took one note of the vocal and I put that into a grain delay. I think it's the Ableton inbuilt one. I forget what it's called. Probably just grain delay 2 or something like that. But it's just repeating itself. So that comes in sort of like this tonal layer. You can see I've dropped that by negative 18 dB there. So yeah. Now, there's not a lot of panning going on here with the effects. I've sort of kept them pretty central. I'm going to send this in for feedback, but I think by the time I get to the final master, I'll probably do some panning on all these to get them sitting in different spots so that they're not all centered. But pretty much, yeah, like there's just a lot of rises and fallers constantly going on. And like I always stress this, that you need that a lot of the time to drive the track so that you clearly have defined sections and you're always coming from something and going to something. So I'll keep going after that. We got the break fills here. Now for that, that's literally just my heavyweight sample. I've got like a Moonboy vocal rack on here. And then I basically took the like in heavy, just like the like this little part here, put that on another channel and gave it a bunch of reverb followed by OTT and flattened that and then reversed it. So I have this like reverse reverb tail that comes in. Basically what I've done is I've reverbed them out and filtered them down.
Now you know why I still love you. Now you had to leave.
I'm not obviously going to show this because, you know, there's some of the stuff I don't want people going to grab the exact same samples that I use. But essentially what I do at the end of the build is I have like a little altar boy formant shifting it down, and then I repeat the vocals, like make it stutter, and sort of pan it from left to right.
We were never meant to be.
You can see I'm formant shifting it up, panning it from right to left, and sort of stuttering the vocals. That creates that effect. And then at the start of the drop,
Now you know why
I just have the vocal sample. Again, a bunch of effects and stuff on here. I won't get into the vocal processing because I feel like I do that quite a bit, and you guys can definitely figure that out from other ones. I mainly just want to get through the track. Break drums. So standard. So I've just got like a hat. So literally it was that sample. And then I've made it a quarter note sort of pattern here, but I've dropped down the volume quite substantially, negative 8 dB on the second one. So it gives it a bit more swing instead of just sounding like this. And then I chucked a cube rack on where essentially I'm just washing it out a little bit, putting a bunch of reverb on it. Essentially there's just a lot of reverb. And then I've got this jungle break, this amen break that essentially I've filtered down and reverbed out, and that comes in. So as we go along, it filters up, the reverb gets less, so it gets more dry. Essentially, it's just bringing it in. And then the build drums, I've pretty much just got some from another, my Rewind unreleased track, so that's the build snare. Kick, same thing, getting faster, just getting high passed and washed out at the end, and then a clap. So that's it for the bill drums. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the non-drop sections. When I get into the second break, I will... Actually, I'll show you guys that after I've gotten to the drop stuff. So if we move into the drop drums now, I'll solo those. So you can see I have a fake out here and then I have breaks. Now, originally I had a pretty standard DNB one or formation like this. But I actually took that out because going through, I actually found that the more jump up pattern, like the kick, snare, snare, kick, snare, snare, that came a little bit, it sort of hit a bit harder. Now you'll notice I have some reverb here on the snare. So essentially what I've done there is I've automated up reverb followed by OTT on that snare so that it sort of like washes it out. So you'll hear... So sort of like it gives it that big reverb sort of, and then we come straight back into the dry drums. So we got basically kick, snare, you got your quarter note hats, just closed hats, and then quarter note open hats from a Mackie G pack. Actually, that should be there. And then I've got an offbeat hat from the Noisier pack, and that's stacked with an offbeat perk. So your top end percussion all together sounds like this. Not too much going on. In the second part, I have a ride from the Virtual Riot pack. And I'm just paying that left and right, as you can see here. I've automated it there. And then going through, yeah, I just have like the break fills. Just like a pretty classic standard Amen break. Now you'll notice like when I get to the end of each phrase, I actually completely cut the drums. Now the reason I do that is because essentially I just have the build drums come back in. So I just took, where would it be? I think this section here from the build. And essentially what happens is I cut the sidechain because the sidechain trigger I have going on both the kick and the snare, which is, you would have seen the automation for that earlier. It's just the shaper box here. So you can see that dipping down. So basically what I do is when I get to the fills, I just cut out the sidechain trigger. So that goes away. So there's no sidechain. I just bring the build drums back and then I cut those. And I have a fill here, which I made. So essentially what I did for this, because I'm pretty bad at like doing drums myself. I struggle with that. It's still something I'm learning. Like specifically more traditional styles of drums and fills and breaks and stuff. Now essentially what I did was I took a bunch of different breaks and I just took little bits from them and sort of stapled them together. And then glue compressed it so that because they were all over the place volume wise, so I just had to glue compress it. So I dropped down the threshold, gave it some makeup gain, and that just sort of glued it together. And I found that by cutting the main drums and then having the build drums and then cutting those and just having a break, it's sort of really drum wise, you know, you're getting this sort of thing going on. I'll do that. See, right, like if you can just have your drums giving you that sense of, oh, we're going away from the main thing, building up a bit, and then some a little fill happens or a break or whatever, and then you come back into the main ones. It's a lot more interesting than just like having a slightly variable kick snare pattern, sort of like I've done at the end of this. So essentially, like at the end of the shorter phrases, I've done just kick snares. Stuff like that, but then at the end of the main three phrases of the drop, I really take you away from it. Now, going further into this, I actually have this big fill here that complements this. So if you hear... So what's happening here is I'm basically dropping these, doing a sub drop. So if I turn off these, and this is a part that I really wanted to get into. So that was just a big sustained horn. Now what I've done is I've dropped the volume, I've tapered that off. And then I've turned on an auto filter. So essentially the resonance at a certain part, which I thought sounded cool, is boosting as the sample volume drops. Followed by that is just a saturator. Just to like cut off at 0. And then I've got a shaper box here. And essentially that's just shaping it. So it's a 1-on-4D. I don't even know what that means. Personally, I'm not too clued up on time phrasing musically, but it just sounded good, same as what I always do. So I've done this LFO shape. It's not completely hitting the bottom. See, that sounds a little bit too much, so I want it to flow a bit more. And then I've got a cube rack here where I'm basically just washing it out, reverb followed by OTT. And then filtering down with a low pass filter and filtering up with a high pass filter. So it sort of just like washes it out and brings it away from being a full spectrum thing. Now next to that, I've then got this from the Skrilla pack. And then I've got delay on it. Now that follows the same pattern, but slightly different. So they sort of play off each other. I've then taken that and reversed it so that it comes up here. I've reversed like a DJ spin back. And then I've obviously got the fill from before, the drum fill. And then I've got a big womp. And then this one here. So the womp just basically did a parallel delay there. And then this one. So this one here, it's got quite a lot of effects on, so I'll show you guys what I did. So that's just like a high-end metallic per kit. And I've given it reverb. Corpus, which basically just, I made it pretty close to the key of the track, D sharp, put it on pipe mode, and then just mixed this around until it gave it a bit of resonance, made it sound like it's a bit more in a pipe. Got some thermal distortion. Portal. That basically the portal just seemed to add like a quick LFO. That's literally just like the bass portal default setting. I've got a soothe because we had some pretty harsh upper frequencies, and OTT. Cut the sub. And then I've just got a shifter where I'm like frequency shifting down the fine. And then I'm also dropping the volume as you go along there. So altogether, you can get like this really cool little fill here. And what you find is that you're sort of like bringing the bass in, and that's filtering out, and you're sort of having this delay, and then you have these suck back elements together with the drum fill. And then you hit the next section, you have a big like, buh, like a womp, and then you keep going. So yeah, that was one of the main things I wanted to show you with this song, because I feel like I struggle with fills often, and a lot of people do. So it's really about just like taking it away. Like I completely cut the main drums here. Now for drop leads. So this would be the main one that you guys want to get into. So basically what this is a fun old lead. It's got a lot of processing on it. So I'm going to basically turn all these off, and then I'll go through it. So how I did this one. So I've taken... So if you guys enjoyed that one, go on ahead onto my Patreon. It's patreon.com/yussyyussy, and you can catch the rest of that video where I go through the rest of the song.